Hello, I'm Joe Neville and welcome to video 2 in this series about Python and REST APIs. The objective in this video is to get data from an Aruba OS switch using Python via the device's REST API. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, as networks scale ever larger and we see the explosion of IP-connected devices, there's a trend towards a more programmatic approach to network management. Basically, that means moving away from the cumbersome CLI commands and using code to manage the network. It's also a great way to learn new skills and coding and learning tools that would normally be part of the domain of software development guys and not networkers such as myself. I've got a how-to demo for you coming up, and here's the kit that I'll be using. So I've got an Aruba 2930F switch running the latest image, that's WC1603. It doesn't need to be this switch. There's many Aruba switches that do have this REST API, as long as you're on images after 1602, I believe. We also need a Python work environment, which can be Windows, Linux, or Mac. If you haven't watched the first video in this series, please do. I show you how to set up this work environment. There's a number of tools that you will need to follow along with the demo. Links on screen now for that first video. So here's my very simple network diagram. I've got a Fedora 25 virtual machine on the 192.168.1.0/24 network. My Fedora 25 is .70 and my Aruba switch sits on the same network and is .29. So these devices, they can ping each other. There's IP connectivity between them. Okay, how are we going to get this data off of the switch? Firstly, we're going to be using a REST client called Postman, which is essentially like training wheels. It's a great environment to use to send data to a REST API. Then when we're confident of what we're doing with that, we're going to be using Python code, which takes advantage of the requests library. And to quote the requests website, there's this rather tongue-in-cheek description. Requests is the only non-GMO HTTP library for Python, safe for human consumption. Without further ado then, here is my Fedora 25 virtual machine running on VirtualBox. I'll log into the switch first so that you can see the configuration. Here's the config. So we've got 3 VLANs on there, VLAN 1, 3 and 4. There's a show version, so 1603 is the code. And before you start this work, you need to ensure that the REST interface is enabled. There's this REST-interface command. We'll just turn that on. And there you can see that it is enabled and up. So on the switch, we're ready to go. Bring up that configuration again. So the data that we're going to grab off of the switch via the REST API is focusing, just for this demo, on VLANs. So I'm going to get this information essentially here, the VLANs that we've got and their name. Now, how do we know what information that we can take from a device? Well, that comes in the form of a schema which you can download from the HPE Aruba website. I'll put links to this in the description for the video, but basically if you search for 2930F series or any one of the Aruba switches, at the bottom here you have the software releases. If you hit that, you go to this, you can search for 2930F and that will take you to the software downloads. If you go to the software downloads, you have here where you can download the latest versions of code. So there's my 1.16.03.03. And also in this table, we have this. So 16.03 REST API and JSON schema. So if you hit that button there, you can download that. Essentially, that's a zipped folder with a number of HTML documents within it. Now, the HTML document that we're interested in is in services, common and server, and this is the file here. It lists the services that you can interrogate via the REST API. So we've got ACL, debug. If we scroll down, so it's in alphabetical order, you've got IP route there. We are going to be looking at the VLAN service here, and it shows you what you can do. So you can do gets and posts, etc. For this video, I'm just going to be doing a get of the VLAN. As I mentioned, first of all, I am going to be using Postman, so a REST client, to interrogate the switch. Here's Postman. What we do with Postman is we enter a URL into this box, hit send, and then that will be sent off to our switch. And if the URL is correct, the switch will respond with the information that we've asked for. Okay, here's the URL that we need. I've already entered it. So it's the IP address 192.168.1.29. So that's the switch. That's the management interface of the switch. Then we've got /res/v1/VLANs. And what we do is we send that off. And down in this box, we'll see the response. Okay, so if we send, make that a bit larger. And you can see the response here. This is what's come back from the switch. I'll bring up the configuration at the same time. So you can see there, we have VLAN 1, the name is default VLAN. And you can see there, VLAN ID 1, the name default VLAN. It's got this other information as well. Just for this demo, we're interested in the ID and the name. If we go down more, we can see VLAN 3, floor 1, data VLAN. I just gave it an example. Name 4 is floor 1, video VLAN. Okay, so we've got that information. What we've done there is we've sent HTTP to the switch and we've received JSON back. And at this point, you may be wondering, what is JSON? Okay, so just looking up JSON on Wikipedia, JSON is an abbreviation for JavaScript Object Notation, open standard format that uses human readable text to transmit data objects, consisting of attribute value pairs. And you can see that here. So this is actually the JSON, as it's called pretty, the way that it's printed out, so it's more easily readable. The raw looks like this, which is a bit harder for humans to read, obviously, so we do this and space it out so that we can scroll down and read this nice and easily for us. And what you'll notice here is that we have these attributes, so it's a key and a value there. So you've got a key and a value and a key and a value, and you've got the same thing, name, that's the name key and that's its value. And you may be wondering, what's so interesting about this? I could just do a show VLAN and get the same information. Well, the important thing here is that this is structured data. So the data is already in the format of key and value. And that's really important for being able to use this data. So now once we have it as a key value pair, then we can do lots of other things to it. We can essentially pass that information to other programs so that it can be displayed or acted upon. If you're a little confused at this stage, I wouldn't be too worried about that. As you become more exposed to this and more experienced with this type of transaction, you'll realize the importance of structured data versus unstructured. Okay, so that's using Postman to grab this information, and we can display it here nicely for us. But we need to take it a step further to actually programmatically manage this network, and that means doing the same process within Python. Now, this is where it becomes a little more involved. I'm going to open up Pycharm. And my terminal. So what you can see here over on the left is a short Python program which I've written in Pycharm, and it essentially does the same thing that we've done with Postman, but as a Python program. Let's step through the Python now. Okay, so we start off by, at the top here, by importing requests. That's the HTTP library that we're going to use. I've also done an import of PrettyPrint so that some of the information that we need can be printed out in an easily readable format. Now, next up we have this URL that we've created. So this is an object with this string of the URL, and if you think that you've seen this before, that's because that's the same URL that we used with Postman. So that's what we are going to be sending to get the VLAN information from the switch. So that's our URL, and what we do is we need to pass that URL to requests. So on the next line, what I've done is I've created an object called get_VLANs, pass that to requests to perform a get with that URL as the argument. Now, requests is great because it handles the sending of the URL and it handles the response back from the switch. So we don't need to worry about that. The response will be pumped into this object, this get_VLANs object that I've created. And what we want from the response is the JSON. So I've created another object, get_VLANs_JSON. And I've done that by calling JSON on the get_VLANs object. And I have paused there to print that out so you can see what format, what Python type that get_VLANs_JSON comes back as. So let's run this program up to that point. I'll just make that a bit bigger. If we do an ls, you can see the different programs in this directory that I've got, and I've got the get_VLANs. Now I've written it in Python 3. So to run it, I do Python 3 get_VLANs. Okay, so the class is a dictionary. Now in Python, a dictionary is key value pairs. And that's what you've already seen from the JSON. So the data itself is structured, it comes as a key and it comes as a value. So that's the type. Now let's have a look at the next line. I'll just uncomment that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out the get_VLANs_JSON for you so you can actually see the information that's come back from the script. So if we run that again, right, there's the information. So this is the JSON coming back, and it's actually, in this format, it's a Python dictionary. And if this looks familiar, well, it's exactly the same information that we saw in Postman. So we have, there's the key for the VLAN ID of 1, the value of 1, and there's the key of name and the value of the default VLAN. So what we've got there, we've got our 3 VLANs and their names. And the great thing about this is that in this format, the data is now a Python dictionary. And with And once it's in that format, then we can do other things with that information. Okay, so let's uncomment and move on with our program. Now, this next part is creating an object called elements. Now, why I've done that, one of the things with this is that you can see this data in this dictionary, but what we need to do is we need to delve into the dictionary and be able to grab the information that we need for our program. Okay, so if we look through this, so curly brackets here, they denote a dictionary, but let's have a look at this. So this is our first part of our dictionary here, this collection results, that's our key, and this is the value of that is actually a dictionary itself. So that's not the information that we want. What we want is the information that's part of the key VLAN element, and the response from that is actually, that's a Python list there with a square bracket, so it's a list of dictionaries. So that's actually quite a few layers of information that we need to delve into to be able to grab the VLAN ID and the name, which is what I want to do for this demo. So what I've done is I've created here, within this dictionary, I've created an object of elements which grabs the VLAN element from here. So what it will do is it essentially takes the results of this dictionary key, this VLAN element, and works on that. So in short, we're essentially receiving all of this information back, but by creating another Python object called elements here and calling the VLAN elements, I'm saying, right, forget this first entry, I'm not interested in that, all I'm interested in is this information. So that's the next line here, this elements. Okay, then finally, let's uncomment these. What I've done is, that's a simple print line there, and then I've run this for loop, so for x in elements, print out the VLAN, then a value, then a tab, then the name, and then this other value here, 1. And what those values are is the VLAN ID, so that will go here, and the name, which will go here. So what's happening there is that this for loop will go through our VLAN elements here, looking for the key of VLAN ID, and it will take the VLAN ID's value and print it out in line here, and it will also look for a key of name here, such as this, and it will print it here. And then it will go through each one of these dictionaries in the VLAN elements, printing out that information. Okay, so let's run the program now. And there you go. So what we have is we've got the information there has come back as the pretty printed JSON, but down the bottom there, we've got this table which I've created of the 2930 VLANs, and you can see those. We've got the VLAN 1, that's the key there. It's taken the value, put it in this column alongside the name value. So I've been able to print out the VLANs and their names in this small table. I'll just run it again so you can see that. Might make a bit more sense if I just run it like that. Okay, so that's the table that I have created. Okay, with this Python program, what we've done is we've used the request library to fire HTTP using this URL at our switch. Then we've taken the response, created a Python object from the JSON of that. Then we've delved into the JSON, picked out the VLAN element dictionary, printed out the line 2930s and run a for loop over the VLAN element dictionary, picking out the VLAN IDs and the name to print those out. And that's quite a simplistic example, because we're essentially taking the information and we're just printing it out for humans to read. Now, this is much more powerful when you think that you can take that information, so the VLAN IDs and the names and other information like this. Because it's structured, you can then pass that information from one Python program to another, or you can pass it to some other code, or imagine a kind of GUI, etc., to print this out, or to use this to check that VLANs are on a box, etc., etc. The whole point is that you've managed to grab the data and get it into a format that code can use. Okay, so that's it. So that is getting data from an Aruba OS switch using Postman, and then we moved on to Python to grab the same information and print out the VLAN IDs and names on a box. In the next video, I will be doing a post, and with that, we can actually configure a device. So please join me for that. And please do like, comment and subscribe to the channel. That's all for now. My name is Joe Neville. Thanks for watching and goodbye.